This session will be out of this world. We are most fortunate to have Ken Davidian, Director of Research and Program Manager for the FAA Center of Excellence for Commercial Space Transportation. He is also well known to us as the Editor-in-Chief of the peer-reviewed journal New Space. He will share with us a very up-close view of the critical relationships of academia, the private sector, and government in the field of space exploration.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate that introduction. Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in the world of space, in the scientific world, with respect to representation of minorities, of underrepresented groups, of women, and we're always trying to do better. Of course, it's a constant struggle, and there are many allies of diversity and equality among white males, and we are trying to work within the system as well as without the system to help promote diversity and equality in the sciences and in space. You mentioned the partnership of government, commercial, and academia, and those three communities are absolutely looking inside themselves to try to understand what they can do better. I know the science community is absolutely taking a good hard look. Commercial space is making a real big effort at hiring as many people as they can from all backgrounds. What's kind of interesting, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, is that the new generation, the millennial generation, has a real opportunity to help stimulate change from within. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but there's also been an increase in diversity, for example, in all workforces due to the forced and extended remote work situation due to the pandemic. We've absolutely, there was a report just recently in the Washington Post talking about how Twitter has seen an increase in their African-American community number of employees, the number of Latino community employees. And so diversity is actually being increased in the workplace, not just in space, due to the pandemic and to some external factors. I guess there's a whole slew of factors that are going on within and particular to the millennial generation, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I'll preface this whole discussion here with, if I had not read this in an academic handbook where every single statement pretty much was cited from existing research, either in organizational behavior, organization theory, psychology, human resources. These are all current research that's being done, particularly on the millennial generation and how they can affect organizational change and increase diversity in the workplace. So what I want to do is I want to spend a couple minutes here, again, citing some research, at least the research conclusions, and then what these sort of mean in terms of developing organizational change that can lead to increased diversity. So first off, and again, I would not have believed that there was such a difference in the generations, because I feel, hey, I'm an early adopter, I'm good with technology, but on the whole, there's always going to be individual counterexamples, but on the whole, these are characteristics of the millennial generation. And we're talking about people born between 1981 and 1996. So here it goes. First point is that younger people now change jobs and companies very often in less than 3 years, prizing their flexible career paths over long-term career stability. And millennial generation employees feel less connected and less committed to their organizations despite feeling satisfied with their work. So together, these trends help to explain why turnover rates are much higher among millennials than previous generations. What this means is that millennial generation rarely defines career success in terms of workplace longevity. So the second major point goes like this. Organizations are trying to better understand what motivates the younger workforce, including how to best manage and retain them. And turnover, because turnover is costly, organizations benefit by being more attuned to their employees' needs and wants. So this greater turnover has resulted in a paradox that employers are trying to retain employees who don't wish to be retained necessarily. So this leads to this following point. Most millennials are more knowledgeable about and comfortable using technology than their more senior counterparts. Millennials tend to be early adopters of new technologies and advocates for their adoption of in the workplace. New technologies, devices, and social media platforms facilitate the expression of the millennials' preferences, criticisms, suggestions, grievances, and demands. So the millennial generation possessed technological savviness that past generations lack, and the ability to use that savviness to invoke change. And in fact, there was just an example in the Washington Post, again, talking about how middle schoolers felt that the COVID protocols of their school were being too lax. So they organized a protest by using their devices, the technology, and the social media. So they're able to use their technological savviness to affect change. So the millennial generation tends to display more confidence as well than previous generations at a comparable age and organizational position. So heightened confidence is rooted in how they were parented and how they were taught in school. So they're more apt to question workplace norms, practices, and policies and expectations that the upper level organizational members put in place. So millennial generation are more confident, they're more comfortable expressing their ideas to their seniors, initiating and advocating for change, and demanding that their seniors listen and take action. So younger employees also want their organizations to act as responsible corporate citizens, aligning with the needs of consumers and society at large. There was a 2007 article in Fortune that talked about how organizations are no longer solving customers' problems, but they're solving the world's problems, like energy shortage, like sustainability. So this is a reflection of the millennial generation's desires for organizations to act as responsible corporate citizens. 75% of the millennial generation stated that they would rather take a pay cut in order to work for a company that prioritizes socially responsible practices. So they're dedicated to their values. They desire a greater work-life balance to pursue other interests and causes outside of work. This is very much different than previous generations where think of the company man concept from the 1950s and 1960s, where previous generations sought workplace stability. They aligned themselves to the organizations and their organizational values. And so that's very different from what's happening now. And so the millennial generation expect more from their workplaces than previous generations. And this is a shift known as alignment inversion. So without change, the millennials are not afraid to leave their organizations and pursue opportunities that better align with their own identities and values. And that's a big deal. The fact they're willing to leave to get better alignment with their identities and values. So as a result, organizations are changing. Organizations are becoming more collaborative and changing to flatter hierarchies. They're implementing more socially and environmentally responsible practices. And many workplaces are adapting policies that are more work-life balance friendly. So organizations are changing in response to the younger employees' values. And this is important for diversity because a more diverse workforce can really have an effect on the organizations. Now, when we talk about organizations, we could talk about not only on specific companies, but you could talk about on entire industry segments and an entire sector. So this is a really exciting perspective that the incoming generation can really help affect some changes that allies of diversity and equality have always sought to enact, but different organizations were, organizations of the past were less open to change. Of course, not all organizations are the same. Some organizations, maybe like federal government organizations, might be less adaptable for a bunch of reasons. But the smaller organizations, especially in the commercial space world, where you're talking about startup companies, garage band kind of organizations that are pretty small, and even the ones that are pretty big, SpaceX, 15,000 employees. Blue Origin is got, number of, I forget the total number of employees, but again, thousands of employees. These organizations can change and will change to the workforce because they want to retain the workforce. So to me, this is super exciting. The fact that today's workforce can really help bring about societal change that can help drive us toward better diversity in the workplace, better equality in the workplace, and helping, again, to alleviate the world's problems, these systemic problems that have had such a long time to form. And we're just now trying to, bring them out of their, retrograde kind of practice and try to make things more equal. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We talked about, Carla, you mentioned that, there's a lot of work going on between commercial as well as academia. That's absolutely true. There has been an increase in the diversity of the students that we see coming into the space fields and the engineering fields. It's very, very hard to retain these students, as everybody knows. One of the problems with the commercial space world is that it's subject to a thing called ITAR, International Trade in Arms Regulations. I mean, the history of the space industry came out of missile technology. And so there are a lot of regulations that restrict what technologies can be exported to other countries, and also who can work on within the industry in the United States. Any US citizen can work, in the space industry, but if you have foreign students that want to come in and work in the industry, that can't be done. So as we know, immigration is a great source of diversity within our country. And so we've got a very diverse population, and this should be reflected in the workforce. If because of ITAR, we can't increase the diversity because we're restricted to US citizens, but that's just the reality for now. I think that's sort of the set of prepared comments that I wanted to provide to the audience today, Carla, but I'm happy to respond to any questions you might have and try to provide some sort of insight into what we're doing at New Space to try to promote diversity and equality as well.
Thanks, Ken. That was really fascinating, both in terms of the intergenerational perspectives, which again, I think apply to what's going on in the federal government and in industry. I think the other piece that's interesting is what you were just commenting on in terms of international cooperation and collaboration. It's interesting how many of the space flights have been international for a long time. And that in the context of what you were just describing in terms of ITAR regulations and restrictions. And you alluded to the fact that you think that might be changing in the future. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So ITAR is absolutely changing. There's been a move for the last, I don't know how many decades practically, it seems like it's forever, to try to make trade and commerce between countries and just transferring of technology from the United States to somewhere outside the United States to make it a little easier. There are great stories you can hear within the space community of people trying to get their payloads flown on a Russian rocket and having to bear the expense of paying for a State Department employee to follow them to their meetings to make sure that there was no unauthorized transfer of technology. And we're not talking about super duper computers. We're talking about they had a basically it was a model of a big space station module. And to hold up this model, they had built this, they'd taken a circle and put 3 legs on it, and it would hold the model. And if you turn that stand upside down, it would be, you'd think it was a coffee table. But that coffee table, that model stand was ITAR controlled. And so it's just, there's certain levels of silliness that go along to following regulations to the letter. And so part of the nature of the game, and nobody wants to help other countries get a competitive advantage, not even competitive advantage here, a technological advantage that could be used in some sort of warfare. So we understand the reason for it, but there is an extra burden on the companies to bear these costs of these to have this oversight or whatever. And so there has been a lot of lost opportunity. It's these kind of policies that are very defensive that have led to something called ITAR-free technology. So when the United States could not export technologies abroad anymore, there were companies in Europe, wherever, that would start developing similar capabilities outside the US. So it's sort of stimulated the creation of new technologies outside the US and helped other countries develop technologies that could have been provided by US companies. So this has happened since the 1960s. The French rocket Ariane was developed because the US decided not to launch a French satellite. So the French decided to build their own rocket. And so now you've basically created a competitor out of trying to, keep competitors from getting your secrets. And this is very reminiscent of the yin and the yang. You know, you've got out of competition grows, you know, more competition, you know, and it's very interesting how this happens. But these are the rules of the game, and we have to play by the rules. There has been a concerted effort by the commerce control folks, by the military side of things, to help revise and refine these kinds of restrictions and regulations. So little by little, they're making progress. But in terms of diversity, it restricts who we can hire. There are many, many students that come into the United States from abroad that get educated, that would love to live here, work here, pay taxes here, raise their families here, but they can't do it because it's the space industry. So can't say there's a direct cause and effect, but China has got an amazingly capable space industry right now. And a lot of those people in their industry speak fantastic English because they were educated at Stanford or they were educated wherever, at really good schools, in the United States. And so, so again, there's the plus and minus to it, but some competition is healthy, and a lot of times we just have to see the silver lining to the fact that, last year China the country launched over 50 times last year. Once a week they were launching rockets last year. This is more than what SpaceX, I think, launched 39 or something last year. I mean, granted, SpaceX is a little company of 15,000, a big country.
China.
And so it's hard to, it's not like you're comparing apples to apples, but it's really interesting how, they've got a very capable system. I mean, Europe's system is very, space program is very capable. There's a lot of good capable systems here, and they can actually be working together to help promote, collaborative efforts. Like you said, you mentioned international activities, and there's a very, very strong international space community that is working to collaborate, help countries. I got my PhD in South Africa, so I was able to go down and spend some time in a country that was subject to apartheid, and is 30 years later is still discussing about anti-colonialism and trying to decolonize their university educations, their academic programs. They're really still talking about this all the time, and it's interesting to see not only South Africa, but other countries on the continent that are starting to get engaged with space activities through the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, UNUSA, it's short for, or and getting involved with either CubeSats or Earth observation satellites. So there's a lot of interest in this by the individual countries, not because it gives them great prestige and all this wonderful Earth observation capability, which it does, but it also helps develop their workforce, and it helps develop the capabilities of their country, and it helps these emerging economies, develop skills that they can use in other sectors. We talk about how, there's been a lot of studies about, what is the return on investment of research? And they try to, we try to measure for every dollar of research spent, how many dollars, does that generate? And the numbers are all over the place. And there's a lot of discussion. The studies that have been done in the past are it's easy to throw stones or shoot arrows or refute question the results. But the one result that nobody really questions is that even though the results of the actual research can't be quantified, the fact that you're generating these highly advanced or specialized students with specialized skills and advanced skills, and you send them back out into the workforce, these are productive members of society, whether they start their own business, whether they move into a totally different field of study or activity. These are it's the workforce that really benefits from the research dollars and really increasing the overall educational level of the workforce, which is what a primary benefit is. So, we just need to increase the incentives and the motivations for a more diverse, general population to enter the research workforce or the, higher education workforce, because rockets and space require, on the technical side, advanced degrees. There are plenty of career opportunities for marketing, for nursing, for food care, food prep. So people don't need to think that you have to be an engineer to go into space. There are plenty of opportunities in a lot of different fields. So it's just a matter of getting the word out, helping people visualize that they can do this through the appropriate mentors and the appropriate role models. And I think NASA's doing a fantastic job of promoting, a more diverse image of their workforce. They've more recently, I think my wife who works for NASA headquarters, she just said today she saw for the first time a press release come out that was only in Spanish, pure Spanish press release that came out from NASA. And so, I mean, broadening the horizons of who their audience is. And I think that's absolutely great.
Yeah, I've forgotten that you did your degree in South Africa, and that was going to be one of my questions in terms of international cooperation activity. We certainly hear a lot about China and Asia, and certainly in terms of Europe, but how much is going on in Africa and South America? We certainly hear less.
That's great questions. Don't forget Australia and New Zealand. So in the Southern Hemisphere in general, we're seeing a uptick of activity. There's absolutely more going on. There were some recent satellites that were launched into orbit for South Africa. They're all excited about that. As we speak right now, there is I think it's a 5-week-long space studies program going on in Sydney, Australia. So International Space University is conducting some training down there. They've been doing that for the last 12.5 years or so. And in South America, there's some activity going on in Colombia and Peru, don't tell me don't. I went down there. Chile. So there's a lot of activity going on. In fact, in this I think just in this issue of New Space that came out in December, there's an article on what's happening in Peru in space activities and whatnot. So a lot of educational activities, a lot of STEM outreach sort of stuff, but as well, the small sat activities now are permeating a lot of the countries that are just starting to get involved, that are not members of a large space organization like European Space Agency.
And are these companies as open as we seem to be becoming for women and minorities in these fields, or
I think they are. I can't speak for all countries and all cultures, obviously, and different cultures have different levels of tolerance and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
But absolutely, I think from what I see going to the international conferences that I attend, the representation of the different countries from the Middle East, from South America, from Africa, involve a lot of women. And so again, the Southern Hemisphere is starting to become more and more active. I know Australia just set up their National Space Agency, and so they're getting more and more active. I have some friends that went to work, from the United States. They went to work down there because it's so exciting and dynamic. The activity going on in New Zealand has got a huge activity going on in terms of entrepreneurial space. Some of my good friends are helping to run the programs down there. So I think these countries really are trying to take advantage of the fact that they just need people. And so so they just are hungry for workers. It's amazing how many. I was giving a presentation earlier today, and the big question was, how do we get involved in commercial space? And the obvious way is to get a job. And there is so much money going into commercial space these days from the private financial markets here in the United States. I'm just talking United States now. There's so much money going in. I saw a little post on LinkedIn the other day from a company I used to work for, where they just got a $100 million contract with Northrop Grumman, and they hashtag we're hiring. And so if anybody wants to get a job in commercial space, really, they need to see who's raising money. And it's almost like every day, 50 million here, 100 million there, 200 million there. Those companies are hiring people, and they can't hire fast enough. And one of the impediments to the hiring, and one of the reasons why they're having trouble hiring, is that companies like, let's say, Blue Origin, very big name, very well funded. Their launch facility is out in the middle of nowhere, Van Horn, Texas, right?
Yeah.
So if you move out there, you kind of are leaving the big city, the bright lights of the big city behind. But guess what? You're going to be out there with 1,500 other young people. This is what and this is what softball teams are comprised of, leagues. You're going to have so many people that's your age wanting to do what you want to do, have some fun, work hard, and learn some great things, launch some rockets into space. And so for 3 or 4 or 5 years, again, millennials will change every once in a while. That's a fantastic opportunity. So yeah, you have to leave, LA or San Fran or wherever behind, but whether it's going to Mojave or going to Van Horn, there are worse things in life. You get your foot in the door, you start networking, and it's amazing. I've seen people move around so much, but when I was graduating from college, and we're talking 40 years ago, when I was graduating from college, you had a choice of going to work for one of the big government contractors or NASA. I worked for NASA, but a lot of my friends went to go work for government contractors. And for example, one said, "Hey, I want to help build a rocket engine." And the interviewer said, "Well, you're not going to work on a rocket engine. You're going to work on a turbofan blade, and you're going to analyze the heck out of this turbofan blade. You're going to be really good at analyzing this one little blade." And that wasn't interesting to him, but he had no choice 40 years ago. Today, you can get a job where you're in a hangar welding legs onto a lunar lander vehicle. You're developing incredible systems and getting hands-on experience, and that is priceless. So I'm really encouraging young people, especially my nephew and his girlfriend, to get out of the comfort zone, go work in one of these places, have some fun. You're going to meet a lot of great people, and your network is going to grow. That's not going to happen. I mean, and granted, COVID has been the worst thing for young people coming into the workplace. There's no acclimation to work culture. They're totally separated from their coworkers. If they're lucky, they've got somebody in their apartment with them. A lot of the young people are living by themselves. And you can tell I'm a talker. That would drive me nuts. And so it would drive anybody nuts. So it's really special circumstances right now, but hopefully it'll end pretty soon. Who knows? There are opportunities.
In general, getting younger in terms of attracting more young people.
Absolutely. I mean, it tends to go through bathtub kind of curves, where when I got hired in 1983, that was the first time that NASA was hiring in 20 years. So there were a bunch of people that they had hired it in their early 20s. And then for 20 years, they basically didn't hire anybody. So now they're in their mid 40s and they hire a bunch of young 20s again. So you have this bathtub curve kind of employment. And that's sort of the way it went. It probably wasn't as bad over the next 20 years for NASA, actually over the past 40 years. But absolutely, at least to me, they all look younger. They look very, very young. But yeah, I think the workforce obviously coming in is at the same age. I think they are hiring more young people, especially the new companies are hiring young people. I mean, let's face it, these companies like SpaceX, the new companies like Rocket Lab and Astra and Firefly, these people are working really, really hard. This is not the 9-to-5, job necessarily. And granted, I just got done saying that millennials want to have a work-life balance, but some of these companies, SpaceX is known for, driving folks really, really hard. Now, granted, you're working on some incredible things, so they're trading off this glamour for, hard work, but I'm sure they get compensated well, and you're part of something really, really exciting. So it's a trade-off, and everybody has to make their own decisions. Again, I totally remember the company man, and that's a sexist term and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, you think of How to Succeed in Business Without Trying, right? You think of the musical, and it was you let them do the thinking, you just say yes, and that's how you succeed. And and it's funny because we're saying right now the research shows the millennial generation doesn't buy it. I didn't buy it. I mean, and I'm 20 years older than these folks, but I mean, the numbers are growing. I was one of a few. Now, hopefully, there's a lot more in the generation, so that on the whole, you've got a positive move toward organizations changing to the values and the needs of the generation they're hiring. So I'm kind of hopeful. I'm very hopeful, in fact, with what can happen, because with the values that the younger generations all share. I mean, you think back into the 60s, peace, love, and flower power and all that sort of stuff. I'm sort of a hippie carryover.
Yeah.
Every generation likes the environment. Every generation, wants to encourage collaboration and stuff. Hopefully it's becoming such a strong impetus, and hopefully the organizations now are changing to those values as opposed to the people changing their values to those of the organization. Hopefully, this is the natural evolution of things, and maybe this is part of the yin and yang we were talking about. One can only hope.
To some conclusion I'm pulling from what you're saying is a bit of optimism. Absolutely. And an environment and industry of growth. And so that to me sounds like real good opportunities for women and underrepresented minorities who are looking for opportunities and growth fields. And this sounds like it's one.
Absolutely. And again, certain places are going to be able to change more than others. I mean, and the United States is nowhere near like many of the countries in terms of paying maternity leave or paid paternity leave and all that sort of stuff. And raising a family is part of life. And, it just happens. I think a lot of these companies are able to accommodate that and want to accommodate that because they want to keep these people in the workforce. They want to keep mom and dad in the workforce. And I think that's a great thing. I am just super excited. And I hate to say it, but the sky's the limit.
Yeah, absolutely. Space is the limit. Well, I thank you so much, Ken. And I really thank you for this note of optimism in what is often a kind of depressing topic where we feel like there aren't opportunities, but it's so great to end this session on something that's upbeat, great for the country at a great time for the country. And I think for people to hear this message of optimism and opportunities is perfect. So thank you so much, Ken, really for your work on the journal, for your work at FAA, and for being such a cheerleader to get all this done.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Carla, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I guess we should thank your wife too. It sounds like she has some influence on you as well.
I'd say.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ken.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.